Here we go. It's episode 10 of the second season of the Exit Philosophy podcast, and we are well into Grapefruit League, spring training, baseball, and that's the sound of Jackson Holliday's home run ball hit yesterday, landing right now.
Very good for a 20-year-old, I must say.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
19. He's 19, I think.
Turning 20?
Yeah.
There's another Holiday coming up the ranks here, too, very soon. I think he's draft eligible or something, but clearly the kid's got dad's genes, because Matt was a hell of a ball player. Anyway, we're talking about Jackson's first inning home run off Yusei Kikuchi yesterday. And when I say yesterday, we should probably timestamp this because you could be listening at any time. But it's Monday, March the 11th. It's the lunch hour Eastern time. And Yusei Kikuchi and the Blue Jays played the Baltimore Orioles in Dunedin on Sunday, March the 10th. Enough about that and onward. I'm Scott MacArthur. That's Richard Griffin. And Griff, don't look now, but we are 2.5 weeks away from opening day at beautiful, lovely Tropicana Field. The Blue Jays and the Rays will open the season at that heavenly stadium, which, by the way, I quite like.
Yeah, month of March from now on will be all about March Madness and the opening of the Major League Baseball season. All the award shows are out of the way. I watched a little bit of the Oscars on Sunday evening. My boy, Paul Giamatti, I knew his dad from when he was president of the National League, and Paul Giamatti was nominated for Best Actor, but he didn't win it. The guy from Oppenheimer won it, and Robert Downey Jr. won Best Supporting Actor, and he's been one of my favorite actors for years, not just Iron Man and all that stuff, but he at one time was a wreck, I guess, in terms of personal life. But
oh, yeah.
But the Bart Giamatti, I stood next to him at a cocktail party that Charles Bronfman was throwing in 1987 at spring training for the entire organization. And Bart was the NL president at the time. And he was standing next to Charles. And I had been drinking heavily most of the evening and went over and I introduced...
Liar! You did not.
Went over to introduce myself to Mr. Giamatti and said, Yale University, huh? Yeah, I got a son. He's 13 years old. I was talking about Matt. I said, I would love to send him to Yale. He's a pretty smart kid. And Giamatti looked at me sideways and he said, son, you better start saving right now. And I went, oh, because I knew what I was making. I looked at Charles and I went, okay. And I moonwalked out of that picture. And that was it for me and Bart's relationship. And then unfortunately, of course, he suspended Pete Rose and passed away before the 89 World Series. But that was my brush with fame.
Yeah, well, and Bart Giamatti died of a heart attack in the 1989 season, right? And as you said, that was right after he suspended Pete Rose over the gambling on baseball issue. And there's been this long-held opinion, Griff, whenever this topic comes up, that the stress of the Pete Rose situation contributed to Bart Giamatti's having a heart attack. And in what will no doubt be a stunning development to anyone listening, neither you nor me are doctors. But I have a really hard time believing that if your ticker isn't going to go, something like a Pete Rose situation is going to change that. I mean, I think it's just a tragedy. Bart Giamatti died of a heart attack. There was a blockage or two, and it was going to take him one way or the other.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, suspending Pete Rose, and rightly so at the time. Of course, now we've got gambling all over the landscape in pro sports. But you're still, as a player, not allowed to participate, or a manager. But, it wasn't the end of the world when Pete Rose was suspended and not allowed to be on the Hall of Fame ballot. So to blame that issue as being important enough to cause heart failure for Bart Giamatti is ridiculous. So, yeah, no, it was an eventful 3 years with the Bart World Series, Bay Area Rapid Transit, which coincidentally came right after Mr. Giamatti passed. But of course, there was one other thing, and I'm trying to remember what it. Oh yeah, the ground fell, earthquakes, 6 point whatever. Yeah, I remember that. I was there.
Yeah, it was when California almost fell off the map, Griff.
Yeah,
The Northern California earthquake of 1989. So you were there. You were at Candlestick Park when it started to shake.
Yeah, I was up in the press box. It started to sway, and those light towers were going back and forth. And I was looking at Al Michaels and Tim McCarver. They were sitting on the ledge with their backs to the field, and obviously at the moment they felt that, they jumped back into the booth. And just watching the one guy up on the tower trying to change the light bulb during that, yeah, that was. And then I had, of course, it was baseball coverage of the World Series was becoming hugely international. And I had 4 Japanese writers run by me to the exit. Like, where are you going? Exit to the press box. But I guess in the Godzilla movies, that's what happens, you know? You head for the hills.
Yeah. Even though the hills are opening up and swallowing people, head for them. Chances are you might survive. So, Griffin, we got to talk Joey Votto, and we want to preview the AL East and give our listener a 1 through 5 how we think the division is going to play out this year. So we are, in a way, especially with Votto bearing the lead of today's show, but we're down this rabbit hole, and I find it quite interesting. And I was 10 years old, right? And I look back at 1989. It's funny because I love the Cubs, and the Blue Jays are my hometown team. There were 2 opportunities for the Blue Jays and Cubs to potentially meet in the World Series in my lifetime: 89 and 2016. Neither happened, and neither team made it in 89. Of course, the Cubs did and went on to beat Cleveland in 2016, Cleveland having beaten the Jays in the ALCS. But my recollection was simply what we saw, and it's also quite possible it was on late enough that I might have gone to bed, but what I saw or read about afterward. What were the minutes and maybe even the hours in the aftermath of the earthquake like? How did you leave the stadium that night? How did you get back to your hotel? All of the things that you would normally do and take for granted, I would imagine, came with extra complications.
Yeah, I was volunteer PR for Major League Baseball, as I did for like 30 World Series in a row. And so when it hit, it's a unique situation where you don't know what you should be doing. You lose track of everybody else in your group. I went out to the Canadian TV mobile, which had a telephone, and a couple of the writers were in there phoning home, making sure that their families knew they were okay. But getting back downtown to the hotel, everything was pitch black. There was no lights. Some of the city bus drivers were making their way through the debris and looking for streets that were open. Finally, like 3 hours later, I forget what time it was, but we got back downtown, went into the lobby of the Westin St. Francis Hotel, where a lot of the Major League folks were staying. I was up the hill near, what's the name? Steph's,
our little hole in the wall pub.
But I went to the lobby of the Westin St. Francis, and everyone went up to their room and emptied their minibar and brought it back down to the lobby. So we were all, again, trying to figure out what was going on. At around 2 a.m, West Coast time, somebody said, "Have you called home?" And I hadn't called home. I made sure other people called home, but I went, "Oh, damn. Debbie's going to be worried," because she was watching on TV with Matt, who was 13. No, he was.
And it's
6 at the time.
And it's 5 a.m. Eastern time. So theoretically, early risers are waking up on the East Coast.
So there was one lobby phone and everybody lined up. And I was like 15th in line, made the call, apologized, stayed for a couple more days, went back to my hotel room. And the most amazing thing is that they gave me a complimentary bottle of wine on the desk. And when I got back upstairs, the bottle of wine was still standing. So I drank it. It was still, it hadn't been knocked over by the earthquake. It was unbelievable.
Was other stuff in the room?
Oh, the drawers were all out. All my stuff was on the floor.
No way.
Yeah. I thought it was a sign from God to kill this bottle.
Just like Griff, no matter what happens on this planet, the alcohol will be safe. I mean,
So I flew home 2 days later with Bill Stoneman, who was the GM of the Expos at the time. And then I flew back out. They were looking for volunteers to go back out and finish the World Series. And it was 2 more games and it was done. But it was quite an experience, and one that I'll always remember, except I didn't remember to call home. But I mean, it's part of what your history in baseball is.
No question. And I remember being fascinated even as a 10-year-old, right? Because there was about a week, maybe a little bit more between games 2 and 3, because the earthquake happened during the pregame of game 3. So the series had shifted across the bay from Oakland to San Francisco. And I remember thinking as a kid, man, like this got to be the first World Series in history where in 4 games, both teams only used 2 starting pitchers each.
Yeah.
Right. It was Stewart and Welch for Oakland, the late Bob Welch, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And Dave Stewart, of course, would go on to pitch for the Blue Jays. And the Giants, that's a deeper pull for me now to try to remember. But
yeah, and after game 4, after the sweep, there was a hospitality tent in the parking lot and all the players from both sides came out and had a beer, and the game was over. And Terry Kennedy, I think, was catching for the Giants. Just to me, it indicated that this was not a big part of life's experience. All he wanted to know was if his Florida State Seminoles had won their football game against Florida. It doesn't matter who it was against, but you know, there was no regret. There was no sadness. It was like, God, thank God we got this over with. Let's go to 1990 and make things happen there. So
right, yeah, there was horrible damage. I mean, the Bay Bridge collapsed. The top portion of the Bay Bridge collapsed in one section and crashed kind of downward on the cars below. Just some horrific stuff. But long time ago, and interestingly, coming up on 35 years.
Yeah,
if you can believe it, in October. All right, let's get to the lead here of Exit Philosophy, Episode 10, Season 2. And before we talk Joey Votto, opportunity to remind you that we do have a YouTube page at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy. So if you want to look at Griff and me as we present this podcast to you, we post all of our episodes at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy /Exit Philosophy. Please like, please subscribe. We're trying to grow the subscribers number. And as the regular season approaches, it's also an opportunity to remind you that at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy, we will select some games and do live post games after the Blue Jays play this season. So we're really looking forward to that. And griffsthepitch.com is Griff's website, where you can get all of his written work. And he's been going strong here through the spring, getting you set for the season. He's also got some really cool conversations with Blue Jays and former Montreal Expos. So griffsthepitch.com for Griff's entire spate of work. Joey Votto, Griff. Joey Votto, Toronto Blue Jay. Now, this is very different than the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about Daniel Vogelbach and Eduardo Escobar and the likelihood of either of them making the team out of spring training. What do you make of Joey Votto and the Toronto Blue Jays? Is there something here, or is this just a feel-good springtime story?
Well, when free agency opened up back in November, I remember on Exit Philosophy, we talked about the how smart it would be for the Blue Jays to reach out and bring Joey Votto in as not the full-time DH. Obviously, he's beyond that. unless he proves him, that he found the fountain of youth somewhere. But yeah, it has no relationship to Daniel Vogelbach or Eduardo Escobar. I think that Joey Votto is more important to the franchise than he is to the clubhouse. I think that the next time you see Joey Votto, and this is just an opinion, I don't have any inside source on this, but the next time you see Joey Votto will be on the line being introduced, the home opener after the 10-game road trip. I think they will allow him the next 2 weeks, 14, 17 days plus 12 more days to get his stroke, get himself back into game shape. He's got nothing to work on except his hitting, his stroke, his timing. And as the 26th man on the roster, my belief is that he's more important as a 12 homer guy who can play occasionally as a DH against certain right-handers, work the clubhouse, be a presence, speak to season ticket holders, work with Jay's Care Foundation, he's one of the 2 or 3 greatest Canadian position players to ever play the game, and to have him here separates him from the Joey or the Daniel Vogelbach types.
Yeah. Oh, without question. So my reaction to this was I still think that sports are at their best when you have wow moments. And when the Jays signed Votto, I thought, well, I mean, outside of the fact that he's a future Hall of Famer who is one of the greatest position players this country has ever produced, like, what can he realistically do for this team? That was my initial reaction. Then he gives his little media scrum with the logo in the background, and he's wearing his spring training Blue Jays cap with the white panel and the light blue brim, and he's in, the throw-on jersey and the uniform pants. And it hit me in that moment, Griff, that even if that's it, even if Grapefruit League games are all we get of Joey Votto in a Blue Jays uniform, and I had not considered your theory and think it's a fascinating one that, that you keep him down at the complex through the lengthy road trip to start the season, and then add him to the roster in time for opening day in Toronto that second week of April. I hadn't considered that, but I thought to myself at the time, Larry Walker is
the best.
Well, however you want to rank Walker and Votto, they're the 2 best. They're the 2 best position players this country has ever produced. That's inarguable. Larry Walker had a lot of great years for the Montreal Expos. Larry Walker's in a Canadian team's uniform. If nothing else, we've got imagery, photographs, video now of Joey Votto in a Canadian Major League Baseball team's uniform. So the 2 best position players that our country has produced in the sport of baseball have worn Canadian-based teams' jerseys. And at 44 going on 45, where I don't really have any more wow moments or allow myself to get caught up in the feels, I just thought that was pretty friggin' cool.
To me, the opening day introductions on the lineup, if Joey Votto is there, that's going to be poster-worthy material. That's going to be a poster, and the Blue Jays social media group does a great job in finding those moments. That's why I think it's important not to have them there for the road trip to the Trop, to the other Orange Juice ballpark, and to Yankee Stadium, but when they come home. Because, we've talked about Ross Atkins' failure over the course of the winter. Every move seems to have been a plan B, plan C, or plan D. There's no plan A that came to fruition. Maybe Yariel Rodriguez, was a much sought after free agent and signed with the Blue Jays. But that's as close as it comes to being the plan that they went into the offseason trying to complete. But Joey Votto at this stage of the season, even if Joey Votto, as he said, had to call Ross Atkins and ask for a tryout, it's the right move. It's the right moment. They need something like that as a PR gesture. And I know there's he can contribute more than just PR. There are people on social media who will criticize any move that any sports team in this area makes. And so you see a lot of that, like Joey Votto washed up. Now he loves Toronto and the Blue Jays. But I think I mentioned the story where if he hadn't played Major League Baseball, he was going to play Etobicoke Senior in the OBA, Ontario Baseball Association. He's got buddies there, some from the 2001 high school. Mark Capone, the second baseman for Etobicoke, he was going to play. He had literally told his group that he would have played, and I was coaching third for the other team. It would have been a thrill for me, not for him, but it would have been great. And so this guy's a Torontonian, spends time here, member of the chess club downtown. He's the most interesting man in baseball, and he's now, at least for the moment, a Toronto Blue Jay.
Yeah, and the Pro Teach facility in Etobicoke, run by Denny Burney. I've got, one of my best friends' sons is a really good ball player. He's 13 years old, plays for the Etobicoke Rangers in his 2010 birth year age group, and they've been using that facility for a few years now. They're not the only ones, but it's a great little baseball facility. It's all year round. It's kind of like a warehouse setup. So you got your side session, your bullpen mounds, your batting cages. You can take infield, et cetera, et cetera. And Joey Votto, he'll sneak in there in the middle of the night on a January night and get some work in. And Griff, he's also purchased a lot of equipment for Pro Teach and has really done well to give back to a facility that helped him as he became one of the great baseball players of his generation. So I always used to laugh, like after he signed his contract with the Cincinnati Reds, and this was before the NBA contracts went really insane. Like they were lucrative, but they weren't $40-50 million a year. They weren't 3-year, $150 million contracts yet, like they've become for the star players. But I used to laugh because the NHL is a hard capped league. And I'd be like, the richest in terms of average annual value, the richest professional athlete in and or from Toronto is the one that could walk down the street and nobody would know who he is. Joey Votto, right? Because he was making $25 million a year at his peak for the Cincinnati Reds, and we don't get Reds games here.
Yeah,
so he was kind of anonymous.
When he was a kid and playing his first time for the World Baseball Classic, and they played the first round at Rogers Center, and it was a great game against Team USA, but Joey Votto was there. And I interviewed him in it's one of my favorite columns that was in the Star. That just getting him in the dugout by himself, nobody else wanted to talk to him. And I asked him, you come in from the hotel? And he went, no, I was staying in Brampton with my mom and I took the GO train. I said, did anybody bother you? No, I just took the GO train, came down to Union Station, walked over here, and here I am, And I don't think much has changed in that regard. He would obviously be recognized a lot more, but I think not being bothered, being treated with civility and respect carries a lot of weight among not just Canadians like Joey Votto, but among every player that comes to play in Toronto.
Yeah, and I remember the first time he came to Toronto with the Reds. It was not long after his father had passed away, and he'd opened up about the mental health challenges, depression that he had experienced and suffered through in the wake of losing his dad. And again, for context, Griff, I mean, it wasn't 2023, it wasn't 2024, where people just sort of raise their hands and say, yeah, I've gone through a tough time. Like, we're talking early 2010s when it still was not something that you just openly volunteered.
Yeah.
So he was
Yeah,
heroic in that way.
that was the gist of the column that I wrote with him, because I wasn't aware of all that. And he opened up a little bit in the dugout. And so I wrote that column, and the reaction was just as you said, like nobody talked about that. And here was Joey Votto talking about the real depression that he had come through and how he was coming out the other side. And here he is now he'll be standing next to Vlad Guerrero Jr., taking ground balls in Dunedin. He'll be standing with Spencer Horwitz, and they can't help but learn life lessons from this guy. And that in itself is a no-lose proposition for the Blue Jays.
Sure, and he's become this social media guru.
Yeah,
right. Like, you know, the stuff of him before he signed with the Jays, sitting on like a park bench, looking kind of lumberjack style, like he had his jeans and his winter boots on and a coat, and just being like, well, he didn't say this, but it was essentially, won't somebody love me? Like, hello, I'd like to play for your team. So he did a great, you know, he's just found whatever it was he needed to do. He just kind of found this niche where he's developed a bit of a personality, and aside from his great play, Griff, those interactions with kids who are sitting down by the on-deck circle, usually in the first couple of rows. So he'll come out, he's due up next, he'll come out to the on-deck circle, get some weighted swings in or whatever it is that he's doing to get ready for his plate appearance, and he ends up in a conversation with a little 8-year-old about something, and it doesn't have to be baseball.
yeah,
right. So it feels like he's come into his skin, and
there was a TikTok where during the game there was a 10 or 12-year-old girl, and she asked him to do a TikTok dance with him, and it's so amazing. They're dancing back and forth, and this is during the game, and it goes on. Maybe that's why I hit 202, but I'm not.
Oh. Here's a headline. Rich Griffin accuses Joey Votto of lacking focus.
I think he's in the best place at this point in his career, and it's the best place for a failed Blue Jays front office to have him around and be able to at least consider having him as the 26th player on what's not a young roster. It might make him feel more at home being with guys in just like Justin Turner, George Springer, rather than the Cincinnati Reds.
Bassett, yeah.
Yeah,
Bassett's
Cincinnati
in his
Reds club that seem to be leaving old people behind, you know? Like all of their stars are young studs. And for him to come over and be at home and be with veterans close to his age is probably the best thing for his career and might re-inspire him.
Yeah, and look, this is the absolute best case scenario. So when I say this, don't take me for a fool. It's not that I believe it's going to happen, but it would be the best case scenario. Would be the Albert Pujols back to St. Louis. Whatever it was that helped Albert Pujols look like his old self in his final year. And I know Joey's not returning to Toronto in terms of returning to the Blue Jays, his first pro team, but he is returning home to Toronto, and maybe, just maybe, that sparks in him a 6-month run where he locates the fountain of youth and is able to contribute on the field to this baseball team. And if he can, it would be a great story. I did notice, and it didn't surprise me because what else are they going to say? But I did notice that he mentioned chasing a championship and club with championship aspirations and et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't roll my eyes at Joey's comment, Griff, but I did kind of roll my eyes at the phrase because quite frankly, with this Blue Jays team, we've been hearing about this for 3 or 4 seasons now. And you and I have drawn up our American League East predictions, and there are going to be caveats here, okay? Because stuff is going to happen. Now, Rich Eisen, who's one of my favorite radio hosts and is one of my go-tos for NFL content, he will, as the season goes on, they've got their preseason predictions, and then they're allowed like a midseason mulligan to make a change if they want to because something's happened. So I think you and I should allow for a potential mulligan at some point, Griff, because you and I did a little bit of homework on this, and that's before we woke up today and found out that Garrett Cole is having an MRI on his pitching elbow.
Yeah, and as of this moment, we're not sure the extent of the injury, but
right,
that's the sort of thing that Scotty's talking about that can happen, and maybe we do a redo at the 81 game, as close as our exit philosophy is to the 81 halfway in the season mark.
Yeah, like right around maybe a week or two before the All-Star break.
Yeah,
right, like
sure.
Halfway point. How do we think?
All right, it's a deal.
Things are going.
So what do you? How do you want to do? You want to go team by team and then do a standings at the end?
Sure. Maybe then I'm going to have to change the order that I explain. Maybe I'll go alphabetical by city name.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest, and therefore the first would be Baltimore.
Yeah. So you know me. You started calling them my, or in your case, you were calling them your O's. Speaking to me, my O's last year, because I rode that Baltimore train until it crashed into the wall in the playoffs, because I even picked them to beat the Texas Rangers, which you didn't. You took Texas, so you nailed it. But I rode that Orioles train right through the regular season, and they won 101 games, and all those years of suffering, starting at the end of Buck Showalter's run, and they stuck with Brandon Hyde, and the payoff hit, and they won 101 games. First of all, I just want to say in general, I'm fascinated that Fangraphs is projecting none of the 5 AL East teams to win 90 games.
That's ridiculous.
I think that's wild. And, to the point where I look
80 some games above 500 as a 5-team group last year.
Right. So I to the point where I'm like, am I reading an article that's 2 years old? And it wasn't even an article. It was charts. No, There was a chart with the 2023 standings and then a chart with the 2024 projections. And I looked at each team. I don't think they have a 100 win projection among any of the 30 teams, and they like the Braves and the Dodgers to be sort of 97, 98. So I find that fascinating. I like this Orioles team. I love the acquisition of Corbin Burns. Gives them a legitimate ace at the front end of their rotation. I think they have some questions in their bullpen. I mean, Felix Bautista is not going to be healthy for a good while still, coming off of his injury, and he was a plus closer for them. They just keep adding talent from their top-ranked farm system. And you saw it if you watched the early part of the Blue Jays game against the Orioles on Sunday, March the 10th. And Jackson Holliday is going to be the next guy that comes up for Baltimore, and quite frankly, should be considered the favorite, at least out of the gate, to win the American League Rookie of the Year award. And they've got Gunnar Henderson, who won last year's American League Rookie of the Year award. Westberg is there. They've got, kind of some youngish veterans in the outfield, like Cedric Mullins and Anthony Santander. Adley Rutschman, I think it was less than a month ago on one of these episodes, Griff, I called Rutschman the catcher I would select out of any in baseball if I were building a roster from scratch. This is a good Orioles team, and they are going to be good again. Maybe not 101 wins good, because you're awesome if you're winning 100 plus. But they are going to be in the conversation, and I think they will make the playoffs.
In response to Fangraphs, I don't see how you can argue that this Orioles team is going to win 12 fewer games than they did last year. I mean, their offense is more comfortable in what they do. They had guys emerge last year, Santander, Gunnar Henderson. They had guys, O'Hearn, who was a pickup, like a second, an afterthought. But this offense is not going anywhere. They're young, they're talented, they're very productive. And to add Corbin Burns to the front of the rotation is great. Again, Grayson Rodriguez is going to be a really good young pitcher. But beyond that, they're third, fourth, and I'm leaving out fifth starters because that always develops with every team. So I don't know. But their third and fourth guys are not world beaters. Bradish had a breakout year last year, but he's injured going into the season.
Yep.
And to me, the weakness again, and you laughed at me all last year because I talk about the bullpen being the weakness. No, the starting rotation was the weakness, and the bullpen was a strength. But without Bautista, I think it'll take them a while to realize that Craig Kimbrell is not the guy that he was. So how many losses will they suffer before making a change and going to Yennier Cano or somebody else other than Kimbrell? So that could cut into their win total, but that will balance with the more wins from a rotation led by Corbin Burns and by an offense that's outstanding. So I got them making the playoffs. We'll talk about standings at the end of this.
Yeah, I'm just doing my Craig Kimbrell right now. If you're watching on youtube.com/exit philosophy. Also, I got the Exit Philosophy logo in the background now, so I love how that's superimposed. So you kind of disappear. Your parts of your body disappear as you move back and forth in your chair. It's a hell of a look on Zoom. All right, the Boston Red Sox, Griff.
Yeah. I'll start with Boston because you started with Baltimore. So
okay.
Boston Red Sox, I think, really that starting rotation is going to be difficult to keep up in the American League East. Be difficult to keep up in Major League Baseball. I mean, they signed Bayo for an extension. Their other guys have been there, and nobody really leaps out off the page at you. Nick Pivetta, he was sort of a swing guy, and now he's being listed one of the top two starters for the Sox. Bullpen, Kenley Jansen, I put him in a Craig Kimbrell type thing where he's going to disappoint. And their batting order, their offense, I mean, they've added a few guys. They're counting on Tristan, the first baseman, Tristan Casas, to develop. Story is healthy. They're going to bat him third and hope that he goes back to his Colorado performance. Devers, there's never any question about him. Tyler O'Neill, but you get to 7, 8, 9 in their order, and you really don't have that much to write home about in terms of keeping up with everyone else.
You like Jarren Duran?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I think he's a good ball player. You know what, Griff? You kind of rhymed off a bunch of names there. There's one thing that has stood out to me, and I think it's impossible to quantify this, but there's something to it. And you know it as a fan. You certainly know it in our line of work, or at least our old line of work, where if we're around these guys every day, we catch a qualifiable but not quantifiable vibe, right? Because you're around it all the time. You're hearing words, you're seeing body language in clubhouses and different places that a fan may not. Like Rafael Devers has more or less called this organization out. Like, what the hell are we doing here? And I'm not quoting him directly, but that's essentially what he was saying. And I think that I think that there's a vibe within the walls of that team right now of frustration, of confusion. It was the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox who were doing a lot of the spending not too long ago. And I think, and especially Devers, because the contract extension, correct me if I'm wrong, is only kicking in now, the 10 and 330-ish that he signed. I mean, he locked in long term after they let Lester walk, after they traded Betts, after they let Bogarts walk. They've let a lot of really good people go. And I think Devers and some of these other guys who've been in the game a little while are looking around going, what is this team supposed to be? What is the MO of this organization? What's going on here? Because the owners haven't gotten broke. They're still really wealthy people. And that, to me, Griff, you mentioned the talent deficit, especially in the starting rotation. That, to me, there's a vibe issue with the Boston Red Sox. And so I think this could be a real tough season for them. I think they win somewhere in the 70s.
Well, I think it started to change when they let go of Dave Dombrowski as their head of baseball operations, because he operated like he wanted to win every season. He wanted to win this year. He was more Yankees than Rays, and they've gone in the Rays direction. They figure the Rays can compete. Let's bring some of their guys in, and it's not working out. And as you point out, in the clubhouse, it's not the vibe that you're looking for in a big market that used to dominate with the Yankees 1-2, 2-1 in the division every year. And that's not what you're getting now in Boston. And the fans are frustrated, and I think the players are frustrated. And I got them not being in the playoffs, but we'll talk about standings after this.
Yeah. So we got Baltimore, we got Boston. Help me with my alphabet, Griff. New York.
Yep.
The New York Yankees. So again, caveat, we are talking to you lunch hour, a little bit after the lunch hour on Monday, March the 11th. Garrett Cole, ace Yankees starting pitcher, having an MRI on his pitching elbow. We don't know what the results of that will be. We do know that if you're having an MRI on your pitching elbow, it's because it's not feeling very good, and that is a bad sign. Bad sign for the Yankees. Marcus Stroman is supposed to start the Yankees' home opener, which would be against the Blue Jays a little more than a week into the season. If Garrett Cole can't pitch actual opening day, that's probably going to bump the Yankees' rotation up, the domino effect, and maybe Stroman doesn't pitch home opener day against the Blue Jays the second week of the year. If Cole is healthy and pitches a chunk of the year, I like this New York team. I think Juan Soto is one of the best hitters in baseball. I don't care if his batting average is 240, 250, or 260. He hits his fair share of home runs. He walks a ton. He is on base 42% of the time. Look at his OBPs. He's in the 400, 410, 420 range. That's a hell of a get. That was an aggressive move. The Yankees have backfilled behind Cole with the likes of Marcus Stroman. We don't know what Carlos Rodon is going to be, coming off an injury-plagued year with the Yankees. Can he get it back? Is Blake Snell still a possibility? I mean, Snell is a free agent who remains unsigned. I think New York is primed for a bounce back here, such that, Griff, they are playing September baseball games that have consequence. Not they're 4 or 5 games out of a playoff spot with 4 teams in between them, but September games of consequence where they are a legitimate playoff contender in the American League.
I think if, unlike the Red Sox, the Yankees are ready to add. I mean, if they send Garrett Cole for an MRI, and it turns out not being good. It doesn't matter whether it's good or not. If he misses any significant time, they'll go out and sign Blake Snell. They'll go out and find somebody if it's not Blake Snell. I don't think they want to bring Jordan Montgomery back because that would be admitting a mistake that they made when they let him go to St. Louis. But Blake Snell, there's this 2-time Cy Young winner coming in to replace a guy who's got an elbow injury. So to me, they will always be doing something to stay relevant, and last year was an aberration. But this lineup that they had, as you well described, with Soto and Judge and Rizzo and Torres, and then at the bottom of the order, Stanton, Verdugo, and then the last two. Okay, you can pitch around those guys. You can get them out, Volpe and Wells, or whoever's catching for them. But this is a team that will not sit back and accept an injury as part of why they will not make a bid for first place and a bye. This is a team that now has the pieces when they added Soto to be that team. The only thing they don't have beyond the top three, if you go Cole, Rodon, and Stroman, they got question marks in the next two spots. The bullpen, I'm not a big Holmes guy out of the bullpen. They used to have a lights out bullpen that you just didn't want to get to in the seventh inning and beyond, but now not so much. So they have some weaknesses, but they also have some strengths that can't be matched in the division and the ability to add to those strengths as the season goes on. So, yeah, of course, I got to make them the postseason.
All right. So give us the Tampa Bay Rays, because this conversation, this is the team out of the five I've been most looking forward to talking about, because there's this myth about this team, and I got questions about them. Fire away.
Yeah, to me, the Tampa Bay Rays are at the end of a cycle. Their window has closed, and everybody just trusts that they'll be able to find the replacement pitchers they need for trades and injuries, from a rotation that had really three frontline guys and now is searching. Tyler Glasnow, I mean, he was a stud. He was going to be a Cy Young candidate if healthy every year. And Shane McClanahan not going to be around. And everybody just assumes that their front office can work miracles, and they'll bring pitchers in that didn't work out. Jason Adam didn't work out with the Blue Jays. He goes down there and he was a part-time closer while Pete Fairbanks was out for a while. But it doesn't work like that. They've had brilliant front office people stripped from that organization. We talk about the Yankees being able to fill in as the season goes on. The Rays they're never able to fill in. And when they have, it's been somebody who stepped up momentarily and got them over the hump to the postseason. I think that window is closed. And to me, this is a team that will not make postseason, will not threaten.
Yeah, I'm with you on the pitching. I laugh, Griff. They probably have somebody named Joe Jones, Pablo Picasso, Ray, Cat Stevens, like Paul McCartney. They probably have people named after famous people in single A that you and I have never heard of, who are magically going to come up and throw 80 innings and win them baseball games. And we're all going to look around and go, how did this happen? But I think this could be a tough year. There are two additional names to that pitching situation. Rasmussen, he's on his third elbow surgery, and Shane Baz still has not come back from his elbow injury, and it's sounding like it's mid to late June at best for him. So how are they going to fit all these pieces together? They made a swap with Seattle where they sent Luke Raley, their left-handed hitting, I don't call him a masher, but he's a guy who could hit right-handed pitching really well, an outfielder. They sent him to Seattle and got Jose Caballero back. Caballero is a young player. So may still be rounding into form. And if you're a young player still looking to round into form, Tampa Bay is a pretty good place to be just because they seem to develop well. But Caballero's a guy who hits lefties well and didn't hit righties very well last year. So is he going to take a step? Wander Franco is not a factor. Is Junior Caminero going to be able to take those regular reps at shortstop and be a trustworthy guy over 145 games? I just think there are a lot of questions here, Griff, and the mythology that surrounds this Rays team sometimes leads us to believe that they're going to be better than they are.
Yeah.
And I think the bubble bursts this year.
Well, I mean, your top 5 in their batting order, Yandy Diaz had an incredible season last year, and their 5th hitter, Isaac Paredes, I'm not sure whether he's even that good a player. He just came out of nowhere like a lot of them do. But you mentioned when you were going down you were running down their roster, the backup players, the bench players that they traded away for parts. And that was what made them so strong over 162 games, is that if a guy was getting a blow, if a guy was resting, they had somebody who fit into that lineup against your pitcher that analytics show is a perfect spot for this guy to come in and fill in. And I don't think they have that depth that they've always had that made them what they are. So I'll go down my standings and then you can follow up.
Yeah, well, no, and I just want to say, even a Rosarena, who really broke out in the 2020 COVID playoffs and then won the 2021 AL Rookie of the Year, exciting player. He can swing the bat, he can steal bases, Griff, but they've sort of buried him in left field because he's really not a very good defender for a guy with legs. And so, nobody's a perfect player. We get that. But even some guys who, you mentioned Isaac Paredes, some guys who kind of take the world by storm for a little bit, their warts end up showing. So I think it's going to be a grind for them this year.
I forgot that we haven't gone over the Toronto Blue Jays, but we do that almost every week. So let's just talk about the Blue Jays and their rotation, because, unlike 2023, where everyone was so healthy and there were 4 guys making 30 plus starts, this season already, Kevin Gausman has not been in a game yet. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
And Manoah was in 1. Parking. So that's the 1 and 5 starters. And they start out the year with 7 straight games before an off day. So I have my revised rotation, because Gausman was going to be my opening day starter, and he should have been last year instead of, that was the first mistake they made when they, instead of, who was their opening day starter?
Manoah.
Yeah. Instead of Manoah, they should have had, Gausman, because that was the right thing to do. And look how it turned out. But Gausman was going to be my opening day starter this year. It's too late for him to sort of gear up. So I would move Barrios up to number 1, have Bassett number 2, then Kikuchi in the 3rd spot at the Trop. And then I would bring Francis into the 4, Bowden Francis into the 4 hole of the rotation, so that Gausman could open up at Minute Maid Park in Houston, because it's a better team. It's a big moment, and I wouldn't want Bowden Francis to be in that spot, and it gives an extra day for Gausman to get it geared up for that start. So it's going to be different and difficult. And we've talked about how it's impossible for the rotation to repeat what they did last year, but out of the gate, this is how I would set it up. What would you?
Well, do? and if you start Gausman in game 1, again, we're presuming he's ready. In game 1 at Houston, you can also throw him in the final game at Yankee Stadium.
Right.
So you get him against New York. I know that means he's not going to throw the home opener, but I want Kevin Gausman in a Yankees series. You only got 4 of those series now instead of 6 every year. So if you can get him into that Yankees series, do it. I'm with you on that. There is an argument for me for Chris Bassett to be the opening day starter. But are you saying Berríos, because he bounced back last year, because he's on the longer term contract, committed so many years to the Blue Jays, that it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think that, and the coming out after 12 hitters in game 2 of the
I didn't factor that in.
Just get the redemption song out of the way on opening day. I think that Chris Bassett, his mind is constantly worrying, and opening day would be an extra pressure, an added pressure. Not that he can't handle it, but he's got the two less seconds on the pitch clock with the runners on base. He's got that pitch clock that he's perfected. We don't need to see him on opening day, and Berríos is the guy.
Okay, so I don't feel strongly enough about Bassett over Berríos to argue it. But I do think it merits consideration.
And the thing about Manoah being on the IL when the season starts, I think that is the optimum result, because I'm sure that they would have wanted Manoah to pitch either at the complex or in Buffalo to see if he can get major league hitters out, because if he's come all the way back, if he can be relied on to be a 5th starter. And if they had to do it when he's healthy, I think that would have created more friction. We already had enough last season when he got sent down twice to the complex league. And I think that if you look at it closely, this might be the optimum result in terms of bringing Alek Manoah back to the majors in proper fashion.
Standings, American League East standings.
Yeah,
why don't we each name first place, second place, third place, instead of going 5 for you, 5 for me, because that way we can juxtapose and keep some drama to it.
I got Baltimore 1.
Me too.
I got Yankees 2.
Me too.
I got Blue Jays 3.
Me too.
I got Red Sox 4.
I got Rays 4.
Oh, there we go.
So
we couldn't go 5.
Ooh, the Rays, Red Sox debate,
5.
baby.
Yeah. I got Rays. There's no way that division is going to have 5 teams with 78 plus wins like they did a year ago. And like we said, that window of opportunity for the Rays has closed. When they get to the trade deadline or the All-Star break, and the Red Sox feel like they need some parts to move up a little bit to be respectable and competitive, I think the Red Sox are more likely to do something than the Rays. So I'm not saying they'll come out of the gate faster than the Rays, but I think that over the course of a 162-game marathon, they will take the Rays and put them in the basement where they belong.
And I just want to say, I feel comfortable saying the Orioles and Yankees make the playoffs. I am not sure about the Blue Jays, Griff. I mean, you got Seattle and Texas and Houston out in the Western Division, or the West Division. And you've got Minnesota. You've got Cleveland. I can't buy Detroit yet.
Yeah, Detroit will be better. Kansas City will be better. They made a lot of moves.
Well, Kansas City's made
them over the top. Their moves to be better, but not over the top.
Yeah, Detroit is becoming respectable. Kansas City signed a bunch of like mid-tier veteran guys, so that you might stand a better chance of naming 4 of their 5 starting pitchers now than you have since their World Series years. So they'll be better. But I think
in terms of wild card, you're dismissing the Central, which I would. I mean, the Tigers not being ready. The Guardians seem to me not have taken a step forward.
No, but I mean, what if Shane Bieber's, they got Tanner Bybee. They always seem to they're kind of like the Rays without the reputation.
Yeah.
They seem to be able to pitch.
I would say either Minnesota or the Guardians with with the Tigers sort of hovering nearby, maybe ready to go in 2025, but not in 2024.
I feel I think I'll say two things for the Jays, Griff. And it is a reflection of the expanded playoff format, which I am in favor of. So maybe I should stop using it as a caveat. Two things. Number one, the Jays will be playing important September baseball and will be seeking, in my opinion, the same that they sought last year, which is a wild card spot. Number one. Number two, they will not win 90 games. So they will be.
Both of those are fair, but I think they might be closer to that situation where they were in the clubhouse watching a game on the road, hoping that they would still qualify. Remember that one where they were like, the season was over and they didn't know whether they were going to be in or not. I can see them being that close again to being a wild card, but no way are they a first place team in the division. And as you point out, the West has one winner and two teams that could very easily be wild card teams.
And I couldn't help but notice this from MLB Pipeline. 2024 farm system rankings, the top 10: Baltimore Orioles, Chicago Cubs, Milwaukee Brewers, San Diego Padres, Detroit Tigers, Tampa Bay Rays, Texas Rangers, LA Dodgers, Pittsburgh Pirates, Cincinnati Reds. So the Padres, I mean, they spent years trading prospects, and I would imagine the haul that they got from the Yankees in the Soto deal helped to propel them back, not just into the top 10, but the top 5. You know, there are the Rays at 6. There are the LA Dodgers at 8. And where are the Blue Jays? Well, I'm only looking at the top 10 here, but they're about 25th ranked out of 30, or somewhere between 20 to 25, 22nd, 24th, 20. Where are the Blue?
Well,
you know,
Scott,
that's an issue for me.
Yeah, but Scotty, that a lot of times there are organizations there that rank in, say, 9th or 10th that have a load of 20, 21-year-olds in the Northwest League and in cities that are still 3 years away from the major leagues. So that is difficult to compare and to use as an argument against making the postseason in 2024, because how do you have enough prospects at AAA and AA to fill in? And it doesn't mean you have to be, you could be the 24th best team in best farm system in baseball and still have the ability to fill in temporarily for a veteran team like the Blue Jays have.
I'm just talking about sustainability.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we're talking about standings in 24. So
yeah. So it'll be fascinating, but I do think buckle up, manage those expectations, and trust that they will be a good enough team. Now they're going to have to stay healthy. You know, Vladdy's got to say this again, and I'm sure I'll be repeating it down the road, but Vladdy can't be a 1.5 win player this year.
Yeah. I have great faith in Vlad and Bo as the cornerstones of this team moving forward. Now, do the Blue Jays have enough of the same faith to pay them and keep them? And that's the question.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a lot of fun because it's coming up.
Yep.
I can't believe it. We're talking to you on March 11th, and it's early this year, right? Labor Day is early in September. So it's March 28th. We're not getting into April. Easter weekend is the opening weekend of the Major League season. It's 2.5 weeks away. I can't wait, Griff. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Did Ross give up making good deals for Lent?
Ooh, I like that one. I'm trying to come up with a Pancake Tuesday or Ash Wednesday or Palm Sunday. It's like
I guess his Lenten period started in November. So,
well, yes.
But Joey Votto's here, and we're both big pro Joey Votto.
Oh, we're pro Joey Votto.
I think the 26th man is not as significant to carry someone like the Etobicoke, the king of Etobicoke, Joey Votto, as is the first man off the bench, the somebody who's got to fill in and play all the time. I think that they can carry Votto. He might surprise. He might get that adrenaline burst that you pointed out with Albert Pujols going back to St. Louis. So we'll see. But I would love to see him line up on the introductions on the baseline, on the third baseline on opening day at Rogers Center, and welcome him back to town.
That would be great. And I didn't actually think that it would come to this, Griff, but we are quite likely going to find out who Kirk Cousins signs with as an NFL free agent before we find out who Blake Snell signs with as a Major League Baseball free agent. And when you consider that MLB's free agency starts 2 months into the NFL active regular season, and that was 4 months ago. Oh, we're wrapping this episode up.
I think
soapbox, leave the soapbox elsewhere.
I think our friend Arash Madani is going to be thrilled that Kirk Cousins signs anywhere except with his Minnesota Vikings.
Yes, Kirk Cousins will be moving in next door to Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. We'll leave it at that. Great to have Joey Votto in a Blue Jays uniform. And we will be with you live on youtube.com/Exit Philosophy whenever the Blue Jays make big news. Otherwise, it'll be next Monday that we drop our next episode of the podcast as we inch ever so closer to opening day. Have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone, for listening.